Amazing. We made it.
We did.
Once again, we've had some technical challenges, but we're here. We're here.
We're here. That's the main thing. So
Welcome to
good.
Little Life, Big Loss.
Yes. No, thank you for having me. It's an honour to be here to talk about our little lives that we have lost, unfortunately. So it's nice to be able to have a space where we can talk about them and, not have to be ashamed, I suppose, or worried that people feel uncomfortable talking about them. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing off limits here.
yeah, that's good.
So as I just asked Amy before we pressed record, she has listened to the podcast before, so she understands that it's just open slather. We just chat.
Yeah.
And Amy's actually friends with one of the other ladies that I've interviewed on the podcast, Alison. I
Mhm.
believe you guys were pregnant at the same time. So we'll get started with the first question, and then you can lead into
Yeah, no, that's
it.
fine. Yeah.
Who was Amy before she experienced baby loss?
I think I was very naive. I think I was very I had losses of adult people in my life and I always thought that was very traumatic and but I definitely think 100% I'm not the person who I was before my journey started. But I don't know exactly how to explain how it's changed. I just think yeah, it's more of awareness of what's going around. I have a lot more empathy for people
Mhm.
as well, which I think I always had, but I think there's that bit more there to know that as much as someone might look like they're okay or look like, things are going well, it's not always the case.
Mhm.
Sort of for me as well, like I've had two successful pregnancies and I know that some people might have viewed me and been jealous or think, oh, look at her, she's pregnant, great,
Mm.
not knowing the thing. So I think that sort of opened my eyes to that, and just to appreciate, you know, things in life a little bit more and know that you're not guaranteed anything, So it's really sort of opened my eyes to
Mm.
how unfair life can be.
It's interesting you say
Really.
that. I went to IKEA with Crystal a couple of weeks ago. She's Whitaker's mum, Whitaker's Wings
Yeah,
on the podcast. And she has their new little baby with her. And we got into the lift and there was four lots of parents in there, all with babies, all with kids. And Crystal
yeah,
kind of got separated through the lift and I was just standing there, obviously empty-handed.
yeah,
She just looked at me like, and I was like, I just kind of laughed, like, of course we're standing
yeah.
with fucking five babies, and
And
but she said when we got out, she was like, "You're so strong. Like I wouldn't have handled that." And I said, "When I see people with babies, I don't instantly think how lucky are they. I think, I mean, they're obviously very lucky, but I always
yeah,
think, I wonder what they went through to get here."
yeah, that's
And
right.
she was like, "Oh my gosh, I never think of it like that." But I always
Yeah,
do, like when I see pregnant people, I think, gosh, I hope they get to bring their baby home, or have they lost babies prior to this? Like that's where my head goes now. Didn't used to.
100%. Yeah. And that's the same. Like I had to do, like as I told my story with I had to do IVF, and in all of what I've endured, my IVF was kind of pretty straightforward. And sort of sharing that part of my journey with other mums doing IVF, they were sort of like, "Oh, you're so lucky." But again, it was like, okay, that little segment was fine,
Mm,
but the segments around it not so fine. So, yeah, it's definitely. It's sort of it's made me, I think, be more honest to people with how I feel. Like I was always a very guarded, very I'll do it on my own, and it's made me realize that there's just some things you can't do on your own, and to ask for help and
mm,
reach out and say today's not a good day, or
yeah,
this has triggered me, or you know, and
yeah.
just sort of being like I'm upset. So
I think if
yeah,
you don't talk about it, no one knows, right? I think that's been the biggest thing with my social media. People are like, I just had no idea it could be this hard for some people.
and that's right. Some people really struggle and other people don't. It's people handle it differently and do different things to honor their babies. And like one thing my mum always says to me is because I've three babies that have passed, and I'll say, "Oh, we're going to see the kids," at the cemetery.
Mm,
But mum's like, "You always refer to them as the kids, like, oh, the kids this, you know, you never like,
Mm.
I'm like, because they are my kids. I'm a
Mm.
mum. I'm just
Mm.
not physically their mum, but they're my kids. And I say I have 5 kids, and,
Wow.
you know, that's how I see it. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's how I look at it.
Does
And
your mum not see it like that, or?
I think she does, but I think it's a generational thing too. Like what I went through, a lot of older people in my life come out and they're like, "Oh, I lost a baby," or and so
Mhm.
many of them had that experience where it was just a, "Oh, okay, well, we just brush
Mm.
that under the carpet kind of thing and go to the next one." So going through everything I'm doing, like having like Bears of Hope, having these podcasts, having
Mm.
um, you know, the cemetery is just a new to a lot of people of the older generation too. So
Mm.
I feel like
I
you're
think
teaching them and letting them,
yeah.
I think, grieve babies that they might have not even realized that they were grieving, you know?
And I
So
feel like some of them in that generation could be like, "Oh, just get over it, we had to." But then I think there's
yeah,
also some, so I've got 2 girlfriends on the Central Coast who both, had siblings that had passed away, and their mums, one of them, the mum did speak about it quite often, one of them not so much.
yeah,
So much so I thought my friend was an only child. I didn't realize she had
yeah.
a brother who had passed. And she messages me and she says, "Hey, like listening to your podcast helps so much. Like I'm learning a lot." And then she relays it to her mum. And now her mum is
Mhm.
opening up 38 years later about
Oh,
things
yeah,
she never felt confident or comfortable talking about.
yeah.
So it's crazy that, I don't know how they kept it in for that long. It breaks my heart.
Like, and I think it's a lot of things like back then too, you know, like I teach my 2 children that they have older siblings. So they're called their sister and brother in the stars.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, my eldest, she's 4. So she'll talk about them a bit. She'll be like, "Oh, mummy, I've got a sister and brother in the stars, don't I?" And I'm like, "Yeah, baby, like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, or I say you've got an older sister." So I very much want them to know that they have, and we take them like, so Christmas and Easter and that, we go to the cemetery and we visit
Mm-hmm.
brother and sissy, um, and that. So yeah, so I make a very common practice to know that
Yeah.
they have siblings, and that's how I explain it to them, that they're in the stars.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
No, it's beautiful. So let's go all the way back to the beginning because
Hmm.
I'd love to hear your story in full. It
Yeah.
seems like a wild one. So it started in 2018.
Yes. So basically, me and my husband were a few years married. Thought let's start having a family. You know,
Mhm.
all my friends around me at that point had what I had perceived pretty simple. Fell, you know, announced, "Oh, we're pregnant, had
Yeah.
babies. Great, that's what happened. So we'll do the same." So we fell pregnant pretty much straight away. So again, I was like, tick, you know, done. Everything was fine. Did our 12-week scan. Yeah, great. Everything looks good. We had, straight after that appointment, we had our induction to the hospital, so meeting midwives and stuff. And that's when I got the first phone call to say that our results for our NIPT test had come back high for trisomy 21 and 18. So I was very like, "Oh, this doesn't happen to me, whatever," you know, kind of brushed it off. They recommended me to get my harmony test done. So I did that. That was all fine. And I'll never forget, I remember the midwife we were talking to, I told her about the phone call, and she said, "I was one of those mums that had to make the decision, blah, blah, blah." And I kind of went, "Oh, you poor thing." But I kind of, in my head, was like, it's not going to be me.
Mm.
So basically, that was it. We got the results back from the harmony test and found out we're having a little girl.
Mm.
And everything was fine, cleared, great. She's
Oh,
healthy. Off you go. So we
so can
announced it.
you explain to me the difference between, like, what's the harmony test?
So the harmony test is so the NIPT test, from my understanding, it basically is a percentage. So it takes all different things into, so like your weight, your
Mhm.
age, certain lists on the blood test, and kind of produces a 1 out of 200 chance of them having these genetic conditions. So if you're a bit overweight, it could make your result higher. So I can't remember my exact numbers. They weren't like 1 in 10. They were like 20 in 300 or something, but they were still kind of what was considered a worry. And then the harmony test was a more in depth
Okay.
test, and they
What of
actually,
that?
I
I've
think,
never done
yeah, so that cost us like $400 or something.
it. Yeah. Well,
But
the
that come back,
NIPT test is 500 or something. Like we paid 500.
Yeah, so like I think this tested like actually tested for the genetics from my understanding. Like I said, I was just told do this. So I was
Yeah.
like, sweet, I'll do it. Like you tell me what to do, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Um, so we announced it, we went and started buying the crib, we were having a baby, perfect. And the genetic counsellor from St George Hospital actually called us, and he'd been sent our test results, and he had found there was one result on there that he was a bit concerned about, which was our PAP-A hormone result. So basically, that is your hormone that your placenta produces. Very basic medical.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a bit low. So he said he wanted to just have a chat because that could mean that she could be restricted from growth. My placenta might not grow as it should, so she could be born early, all this stuff. So that result should have been 0.5 or higher. So my result he was sent was 0.2. So he's like, again, not really worried, but could be an indication of something.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of left with high hopes. He rang us a couple of days later and apologised and said that the reporting clinic had stuffed up my report and my results weren't 0.2, they were 0.02. So
Oh,
that is really, really not good.
yeah.
So I was about 14 weeks at this stage. And he asked us to come in to do, and I can never pronounce this word, amniocentesis. So where they take the,
Amniocentesis. Yeah.
yeah, I can never pronounce it. So I was 17 weeks when we did it. So we had to take a bit of the placenta to find out what was going on with her.
Yep.
So we went in for that and they did the scan. Sorry. And I'll never forget it. There was no sound. And I just remember laying there. And I remember staring at the ceiling and just going, just say the words, because I knew there was no sound. So they did. They said, we're really sorry, but there's no heartbeat. She's passed away. So it was a shock. I was in shock. But I kind of knew, I think as a mum, you kind of have some inkling. So we lost her. I was 18 weeks by this stage. So she had passed away. The hospital were amazing. They took me straight across to get the medicine to induce labour.
Yeah.
And I always remember like ringing people. My husband unfortunately had to do the phone calls. I just couldn't do it. And that was, I think, the worst part was telling people that, you know, we'd lost the baby. So the hospital, like I said, they were incredible. They explained what was going to happen. And I just said to them, I don't want to see her. I don't want to push. I wanted to kind of detach myself from it because I knew I wouldn't have the strength to do it. So we went home and just kind of in shock, like in disbelief. So 2 days later, I went back in and I went into labour. So that was my first experience of childbirth. Again, the midwife I had that day, she was just a blessing. She was giving me I called her my drug dealer because she was giving me every drug possible to ease the pain. So we kept saying, you know, come back here, my drug dealer, to try and have some humour. And Bears of Hope reached out and explained to us about the cemetery and, you know, if we wanted footprints and photos and everything like that. So it was really good. There were things I didn't even think of. So she was born on the 6th of February at 3 o'clock. My husband and mum were with me the entire time, but they'd actually just stepped out when she was born, which I was thankful for. I don't know if they would want to be there. And like I said, I didn't see her, and sometimes I regret it, but I know deep down if I had, I couldn't have left that hospital. Like when I see people like yourself or Alison and that held them and all that, your strength is just incredible. Like there's no way I could have done that. And the most weirdest thing was when we left, like my first thought was to have another baby. Like it was
It's crazy, hey?
It is. And it was just this overwhelming, like, you know, but I felt like she was at peace. Like I felt like, you know,
Mm,
I don't know, it was a very weird time. Like I remember the night before I had her, I just had this dream of like seeing like this light sort of floating up through our room. And I always think that was her soul
mm.
leaving.
Did they say how far before, like how much prior that she had passed away?
So she measured at 15 weeks.
Okay.
So they said, you know, so I always wonder too if I hadn't have gone to have that test, how long I would have
Mm,
stayed pregnant for. Like, would I have got to
mm,
20 weeks to go get the next scan and found out because my body showed no signs that there was no bleeding, no cramps,
mm,
absolutely no indication that she had passed away.
mm.
Um, yeah, so we
It's 2018,
basically,
the s-
pardon?
6th of Feb 2018.
Yeah, so 2018, she was born at 6 of February. So
Little fairy
basically,
baby. My birthday.
no,
Okay.
yes. Um, so basically, we just sort of, my whole life become having a baby. Like, I
Mm,
threw myself into having a baby. We got like her feet are tattooed on me. So that was my very first tattoo. And
mhm.
my dad was very against tattoos, but he allowed me to have that one.
Oh,
Um,
thank you. I'm an adult.
and everyone was shocked. I'm like, these are her actual footprints. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't a reduction. These are the size of her feet. So that was very
Mm.
important to me to have that represented.
And so was it
Um,
Prayers of Hope that organised the footprints and stuff for you at the hospital?
yeah, so they did all that and organized that with like with a counselor and them.
Mhm.
And they also took a photo of her and said that it'll always be at the hospital.
Oh,
So they said at any point in the future that you decide that you want a photo,
have you ever got
uh,
it?
pardon.
Have you ever seen it?
My mum has kept it
Oh,
and has it in her room. And
oh,
every now and then, if I've gone into her room, I've seen it. And I, again, like, I sort of look at it and I think, oh, and I just think, I feel like the pain would just be too much to
yeah.
handle. But I think I will. I sort of just recently have sort of felt like I want their photos. I have like a little keepsake box.
Yeah, of course.
Um, yeah, it's just, and I think too, it's sort of like, it's like when someone's really sick when they pass, you kind of just want to remember them
Mm,
in a way in your mind. And I think that's how I want to remember her, is just sort of picture a baby because
mm,
her autopsy came back that she had, I can never pronounce this word either, Triploidy. So pretty much they explained to her she had double the chromosomes.
okay.
Um, so she, like, yeah, so she could have been a twin and just not split. Um,
Oh.
yeah, and they just said it's just one of those one-off genetic events. There's
So it
no
wasn't trisomy 18 and 21. It was
no.
double.
So basically what they said was what was giving all those high tests at the beginning was this PAP-A result being so low. Um, so without that genetic counselor looking into that, we would have thought that the baby was continue being healthy. It was just because he got the results, kind of had a more in-depth look at some of the results on that and went, hang on, this one's standing out to me to be an
Mhm.
issue. Let's look into that a bit further. And he said that's probably what's thrown all your other ones off. Um,
Wow.
so we just basically were told, it's just unfortunate. Nothing you can
Mhm.
test for, nothing you can do differently. You're just going to go on and have a healthy baby next time. So we
Yeah.
were like, perfect, great. About 6 months later, I still wasn't pregnant. I saw my doctor, who was very understanding. She's like, 6 months is not a long time, but
Mm,
understood what had happened. So she sent me to see an IVF doctor to just make sure that we get tested, in case that was just a good chance that month and there is something that's going to hold us up falling later on.
mm,
So we went and saw Dr. Marcella Martin at IVF Australia.
mhm,
We did all the normal testing, my egg reserve, my husband's, semen.
Yeah.
Everything came back fine. She said, you have no problem, as far as I can see at this stage, falling pregnant. Give it another 6 months. We're still not pregnant. Come back and see me. But she was also a very big advocate for pre-screening of genetic diseases.
Yeah.
So she was actually sitting on a board at the time to have it to put through Medicare, which I believe now it has been. So it's
Mm-hmm.
now, I believe, free. Don't quote me on that. But at the time, it cost us about $500. So
Okay.
that was to screen for if you and your partner were carriers for like cystic fibrosis, SMA, I believe it is, and another one. So she's like, look, I tell all new parents to get this screening done because you never know.
Yeah.
So again, me and my husband went and got it done. We have zero history of any genetic conditions, and my husband comes from a very, very big family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we paid the money, got the testing
Mm-hmm.
done. I came back a carrier for cystic fibrosis and the SMA.
Oh, wow.
Um, so my husband, when she said that's very strange, she's like, I've never seen someone be a carrier for both of those
Mm.
conditions. So my husband had to get tested, and she said if he's clear, no stress. If he's positive for either of those, then we have to look at doing IVF possibly. So he got
Mm.
his test done, and then while we were waiting for those results, I found out I was pregnant. So at about 8 or 9 weeks pregnant, I found out that my husband was also a carrier for cystic fibrosis. So, and like I said, both parents have to have the genetics to pass it on to their children. So that
Mm-hmm.
means my mum and dad had to have it, their mum and dad had to have it. Means, like this whole tree line of families had passed it down to everyone, and we were
Mm.
the first sort of to test and know about it.
Yeah.
Um, so with the cystic fibrosis, you have a 1 in 4 chance of having the genetics not carrying on at all. You have a 2 in 4 chance of being a carrier, so your child becoming a carrier, and a 1 in 4 chance of your child inheriting the disease. So we were hopeful because really we had a 1 in 3 chance of a bad result. So we went and got the amniocentesis done again
Mm-hmm.
at 12 weeks. We found out we're having a boy,
Mm.
and we found out he was a carrier for cystic fibrosis. So we had a long 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We saw specialists in the cystic fibrosis field. We went to Randwick Children's Hospital. Um, we researched it, within an
Mm.
inch of its life.
Mm.
The biggest thing was speaking to parents of children that were born with it.
Mm.
Um, and they all said, look, we love our kids, but we would never put our kids through this if we had a choice. Because for a lot of people, it's not picked up until you have the Hill prick test. So the Hill prick
Mm.
test on a newborn is for this disease.
And if so baby boy was a carrier of cystic fibrosis doesn't necessarily mean he would have it or it,
No, he had it.
oh, he
So
had
he
it.
would have been born with cystic fibrosis, yeah. And his genetic. So one mother I spoke to, I told her because it's like a spectrum disease as well. So you can have very mild to someone that can be just get sick really easily with a cold, to someone who has very low lung capacity. It affects your digestive system. It affects your liver.
Mm.
So, like, if he was born when he was given a bottle, you have to give him enzymes before every bottle, so his body would absorb fat
Mm.
because it just affects so many things. And his genetic makeup was the severest. So he would have, if he had have been born, he would have probably might have only made to teenage years, if that. He would have
Mm.
needed a lung transplant. Um, it was just horrible. So we made the decision. I said, I can't do that. I just felt very selfish
Mm.
bringing a baby into the world for my
Mm.
purposes of having a baby, um, and seeing him hooked up to machines.
Mm.
And the other thing too that a few people talked to us about was my husband and I's relationship. A few people I know work with different disabilities, and they said so many marriages break down
Mm.
because of the stress, because of hospitals and work and paying for medications, and it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So we made the decision to end the pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 15 weeks, and it's horrendous.
Mm.
You have to take a tablet to stop the heartbeat. And
Mm.
I'll never forget sitting in that room doing that. You
Just
don't
not
want to,
knowing, yeah, knowing what it's gonna do.
but you want to. Like, it's such a hard.
Mm.
So again, 2 days later, I went into hospital and had labour.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so you had him on Christmas Eve.
Oh,
He was born at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Christmas
oh,
Eve.
fuck.
Um, and I remember just always thinking, like, it's Christmas, like,
Mm.
miracles happen at Christmas.
Mm.
Maybe we got the
Mm.
wrong result or something, but
Mm.
it wasn't the case. So
Mm.
we just couldn't believe it. Like, we'd had 2 babies in 1 year,
Mm.
you know. And I think you always think too, if you've had a bad experience or a heartache, that
You can't have
you get
that.
good at, the next time you get the good result.
Mhm.
So to have a bad result again was just, it blindsided me.
Mhm. Fuck.
And then after we had him, it was about January, I started bleeding quite significantly.
Mhm.
I started hemorrhaging, so I was rushed to hospital.
Mm.
Um, and I had retained product, so the placenta hadn't come away properly. And I was sitting like through all of this. Obviously, I had stages of being upset and hurt, but I remember this day was the day that that was it. Like,
Mm.
I was sitting in the emergency room, just blood clots,
Mm.
and a trainee nurse was trying to get the blood cannula in and everything. And I just remember this, I said to my husband, I'm done. Like,
Mm.
this is my low point. This is my rock bottom. I can't do
Mm.
this anymore. And I just remember that was when I think I really started grieving everything, because I was
Mm.
just like, how much more can
Yeah.
happen? Um, but they did the surgery and they said, your uterus is healthy and good, and so try again. So we went straight into IVF. So IVF was basically our best option because they could test the embryo.
Yeah.
Um, so my IVF journey was t- pretty good.
Mhm.
um, I had, fairly good results. Everything was pretty straightforward.
Do you remember
And
what when you got your testing and stuff done? Do you remember what your egg reserve, your AMH was?
I can't remember, to be honest, but they said it was good for my age. I feel like maybe like a 5 or something.
Yeah.
But
How old are you?
I'm 38 now.
Yeah.
So this was 34 at the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't get many eggs. I think with my first round I got 6 eggs.
Oh wow.
Which they wanted more because we had to do the genetic
Yeah.
testing. She's like, everything just falls down,
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
as it goes to day 5, they drop off, and then enough suitable for freezing, for testing, and then obviously the test results. So we ended up with 2 embryos
Yep.
that were tested,
Yep.
that were carriers. So we had 2 that were good.
Mhm.
So we transferred the first one, and that resulted in my daughter. So she's 4
Mhm.
now.
Yeah.
Um, but even like with the pregnancy, it was a good pregnancy, but the pregnancy after loss is something else that I think was a learning curve. Like the anxiety, the stress, the worry, every little pain, every little thing, um, it was really hard. Like it hurt a lot because it took a lot away from what should have been a joyous moment, sort of finally getting what we wanted, but I was just so anxious
Yeah.
all the time. I was in the end, the hospital just had me booked in. once a week to be monitored because they were like, the
Mm.
midwives knew me by first name.
I think
They
I'm
were like,
moving into my hospital. I'm like, just check me in from week 1 now.
well, that was it. I was like, they're just like, look, just come once a week. We'll have a bed for you. Like,
Mm.
it was just, yeah. But it was horrible too because I just would go into this spiral and, be convinced that she'd passed away and I didn't know, or she had some deformity that no one picked up,
Yeah,
or,
that's right.
and then she was born. She was born healthy. She was born at 39 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
She was 4.5 kilos. So she was a big bubba.
Yeah.
But then COVID hit while I was in
Mm-hmm.
hospital. So we went into lockdown while we were in hospital.
Yep.
So that again was crap. But
Mhm.
I think I struggled with postnatal depression quite significantly. And I think it was just accumulation of everything to that
Mm.
point.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, like I said before that as well, I think, made me realize, I was very honest with people and sort of said, this is how hard this has been and that. But yeah, so we had her and that was sort of good. Um,
What kind of things did you do for the postnatal depression? Was there support and help and things like that?
so I rang Panda
Mm-hmm.
is how I got help. And I just remember sat in my room one day and I just rang them. I said, I don't know where to start, but I know I need help. Like
Yeah.
I'm here crying
Oh, good.
every day. I'm, you know, So they were really good. They got me in touch with, because I actually, through my pregnancy, I should say, I had a Bears of Hope counselor who was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she was really good and really helpful. Um,
And that helped, like, with your anxiety through your pregnancy.
yeah, and she was sort of helping me work through it. And then the Panda put me in touch with other psychologists in the area, and I found one, and she was just incredible. Like she was basically, I think after I got in touch with her and had my first, I suppose, session, like the day or two later, I just remember having almost like a breakdown, like just, I think everything just come out. And
Mm.
I rang her and she's like, put me on the phone to your husband. So I did. And she's like, no one's to leave her today. You all just need to let her, you have the baby. She needs, this is her day to sort of stop and reset.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened. I just laid in bed and because I moved in with our parents to
Mm-hmm.
have that help so my husband could have his support as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's
yeah, so, and then seeing her getting on medication, um, it all just sort of helped. Like, and the sad thing was too with that is so many doctors or midwives I spoke to, because I was only about, I'm going to say 6 or 7 weeks postpartum, was they're like, how soon I came for help. And they said so many women we see for postnatal depression, they're 3, 4 months into it and
mm,
they're only now going, I need help. And
yeah.
I'm like, and they said, we wish women would recognize it sooner and not be told, oh, it's just, baby blues or
Mm.
hormones or something, just to speak to people. So
Yeah, that's
I've become a, sorry.
so getting help is so important. Like, that's so good
Yeah.
to recognize
So
that and reached out and got the help.
Yeah, so I've become a bit of an advocate for that. Like I was very open about it because I
Mm.
wanted people to know that even if it is baby blues, it doesn't hurt to talk to someone and just have that, oh, okay, it's this,
And even if it's not someone I think that's lost a baby, I think as us as lost parents, our anxiety is through the roof
yeah,
more than normal. But I think even just first time mums or, people that have babies without loss still,
yeah,
still get postnatal depression, still get anxiety, still have fears. I know that
that's right.
some of my friends have even said to me just recently, like their anxieties, they had babies around the same time as Millie, and their anxiety was so high because we lost Millie. They were like, "Well, fuck, is that going to happen to us as well?" Like,
And I think that's the thing when you're exposed to a loss, like, and how Millie was, like, it was such
mm,
a rare genetic condition. It's not these things, and that's what I think scared me too. It's like these are things that have just come out of such left field. Like these aren't your normal,
yeah,
oh, like
yeah,
yes, like wow, these things can happen. Like you
Mhm.
hear these stories of people that have these 1 in 1,000 chance, and that doesn't happen to people you know. And then when it happens to yourself or people that
Mhm.
you're close with, you're like, holy crap!
Mhm.
Like these aren't just old wives' tales, or
No.
Um, so we sort of once all that passed, we were good. Like we sort of did what we did with a toddler and a newborn, like a baby,
Yeah.
and then in 2021, we decided we'll try again. So we
Yeah.
thought we'd do our transfer of our second embryo. So
Mm.
we were waiting to do that transfer, and I found out I was pregnant because of my period didn't come to do the transfer. So I did a test, and it come back positive, and I was gobsmacked. I had no idea, you know, it didn't even enter my mind that it was feasible for me to
You
have.
know how babies are made.
I know, and and it's so funny because when I looked back at the time, I was like, I had been really sick a few weeks before, and I was like, this that bug I had the other day, every morning it just really rears its head. How dumb! Like I've had two pregnancies and I didn't go
Yeah.
in the morning, like duh.
Yeah.
Um, so we were like, kind of like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is my chance to have just a baby. We were all kind of, my husband were like, oh crap, again,
Mm.
straight back to the cystic fibrosis thing. Um, we're like, no, we're just gonna. We sort of tossed around like, do we end the pregnancy now, knowing a possibility? Um, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't, knowing that there was still a 3 in 4 chance of it not having
Mm.
it. Um, so I actually this time got engaged a obstetrician
Mhm.
uh, because I thought I want that on board for this pregnancy
Yeah.
because of all the stress and that from my eldest daughter's pregnancy. I think was also caused a bit by being through the public system. You're seeing different midwives and doctors all the time, and
Yeah,
they're
definitely.
very dismissive of your concerns. And as I thought, having an obstetrician, my one point of call and everything would help with that anxiety for the pregnancy if it was to go through.
Yeah.
So I did all that, explained to him, what had happened. So he said, let's just straight away, we'll go get their amniocentesis again.
Mhm.
Um,
So
so
what
yeah,
what was the earliest they can do one of those?
so the earliest you can do it's at 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's really, it sucks because you you're not obviously well into your pregnancy, but you're far enough along where it's, you know, you're getting the ultrasounds done and you're
Oh,
starting to bond
God.
with the
I mean,
baby
at
and
12 weeks, you can see on the screen a full little formed.
a little baby. That's
Yeah.
right. Like, that's your safe zone. Yet here
Mm.
we are entering, you
Mm.
know. So we did that. We found out it was a boy.
Mm.
And we found out that he also had cystic fibrosis. So my obstetrician's like, I've never seen this. Like, because this is so rare for you to basically have two babies with this disease. And still the fact that no one in either of my husband and I's family, like we have,
So
like my
no,
husband, I
no
think
one's
like
got it.
8 nieces alone that could have had this disease that never did. I've got two, and here we were struck twice. It was just mind boggling.
Mm.
And my poor obstetrician, like, I remember the day he made the phone call, and I was like, you can't, this
Oh,
can't,
mm.
you can't be right. You can't be right. And he's like, I even rang them and made the run the test several times to be
Mm.
beyond certain because he goes, I couldn't believe it myself. Um, it just, and the hardest thing too at that point was we had our daughter and we had told her that there was a baby in mum's belly.
Mm.
So when we had to make the decision to end the pregnancy, like days after, she kept saying, oh, mummy, is there bubba in your belly still?
Mm.
And we had to say no.
Mm.
So we had him on the October, it was the 6th of October. He was born
2021.
on 2021.
Mm.
So, um,
Far
And
out.
I found that was like the hardest to leave the hospital. I don't know why. Like, I just remember, like, I think because I felt like what it was like to be
You
a mum,
experienced bringing a
need to have a baby to care for.
yeah.
And the nurses kept saying, like, he's just in the other room. So at any point you want to come and see him, you can.
Mm.
And I felt really bad that I didn't. But like I keep saying, I just knew I couldn't have left that hospital if I did.
Yeah.
And I kept stupid thoughts would enter your head. You'd be like, what if he woke up and I wasn't there? Or
Yeah.
what if he was cold? Or what if he was scared? And I think that was all because I had a child living now that
Mm.
I knew they could feel and that.
When
And
we got home from the hospital, and like for us, it just felt so surreal because I was like, it just felt like the past 9 months hadn't happened because we'd always been in our home with no child, and then
yeah,
we were pregnant, and then we went into hospital, and we never got to bring her home, and then all of a sudden we were home, and it was like, did that even just happen?
yeah,
You
it's
know, and I've never
always
been able
weird.
to imagine her being in our home because I've never had her in my home. I've never had a baby in
Yeah,
my home. So it's like, so I'm sure it was harder for you that third time leaving the hospital as opposed to the first two because you knew the difference. You felt.
yeah. I think you're right. Like I even know back, like when I had my daughter and we come home with the baby, because of obviously COVID and everyone was just in this world of shock, I suppose. There was no flowers, there was no visitors
Yeah.
or anything like that. And I think that was one of my sparks, probably for the postnatal too, was because I remember saying to people, it was the weirdest sensation because I always thought the day I come home with a baby, there'll be this huge celebration of visitors and flowers and balloons, and there
Mm.
was nothing. And I'm like, this is how I've come home twice before. And
Mm.
but it was weird because I actually had a baby this time.
Baby.
So it
Yeah.
was this really weird. I was like, I know how to process this and deal with it,
Mm.
but I don't because I have a human to take care of this time.
And life
Like,
was just scary when COVID was around, like
oh,
everything
it
feels
was like,
the unknown.
oh, it was so bizarre, and and to navigate having a newborn and
And you were in Sydney.
pardon.
You were in Sydney?
Yeah, so we were in Sydney. So like we were in this bubble in the hospital too. So when we come out, we were like, is there going to be formula? Like, is there,
Mhm. Mm.
so um yeah, it was really tough. And because when we had our third baby, that was through COVID as well. And that was sort of that second resurgence of it.
Mhm.
And so even going to the hospital was like, they made us sit and wait in the foyer for hours before I could go up and have that tablet that ended the
Mm.
pregnancy. And this poor nurse, I remember, like she was quite rude, and I'm like, how, it's, I ended up yelling at her and saying, I'm about to give birth to a 14-week-old baby. I think I have the right to go up to the maternity suite.
Mhm.
And she kind of went, oh, okay. But, I didn't know if my husband, he couldn't stay, and they sort of let him in.
You mean
But
he was trying to put restrictions in on who could go in and where you could go and stuff?
yeah, so we had to have like your name down. They reckoned that our name wasn't down at the
Oh,
maternity thing. And,
you're like,
I was
this
ringing them.
wasn't.
Yeah, it was just a nightmare on top of everything else. Yeah, so it hurt a lot that third time. And I think to
It's
be
vibrating.
struck again, I was just like,
Is your phone vibrating in the background?
oh, it is, sorry.
That's all right.
So that was actually the pregnancy. I was pregnant with my girlfriend, Alison. We were 3 days apart, so it was just,
You were having little Lincoln.
yeah. So then Lincoln kind of become our baby, like he was sort of going to be our one that we would go, okay. And because we're both boys, we're like, oh my God, we're going to have these boys together. And, and like her journey was just, oh, it was just, and I always remember like one day we were both waiting on results. And I remember thinking, I can do this. I've done it before. So I'm like, whoever's up there, give her the good results. I'll deal with it. Um, and then her results come back okay that time. And then that's when we found out he had the cystic fibrosis. And And then to lose him, the way she did, just really rocks you, You sort
Yeah.
of think, life's so cruel,
And
you
she
know.
also had to go home and tell her son as well that, baby wasn't coming home.
And she was so strong. And I think that was one of the things too, I was saying before about people being pregnant. Like there were times where I was a bit like, oh, she still gets to have her baby, and never imagining how
Mm.
that would end. Um, but it's also been a solace having someone in your life that
Mm.
gets it.
Yeah.
That when the days are like, oh, I saw this today and it triggered me, or
Yeah. I have one of those
um,
too.
but I think too, having like the TFMR, so termination for medical reasons, was really hard too because you feel like you didn't really belong in any of the care. Like I felt like an imposter if I reached out to like Pink Elephants or any of those miscarriage support groups, because I'm like, do I deserve to be here because I made the decision? And I think that was a really heavy mental thing to deal with as well, because you're seeing these mothers that are like losing babies and
Mm.
had no control over it.
Has that changed in the last couple of years? Because I feel like obviously I didn't know a lot about it prior to Milli, but I feel like there is a lot of termination for medical reasons support groups and Instagram pages and stuff like that
I
now.
think it's starting. So I've actually joined one on Facebook called TFMR Mums,
Yeah.
and that's been really good because I feel that's a really good place to share. A lot of people share their experiences, and
Mm.
and there's actually, I think it's the 12th of March is actually TFMR Day,
Yeah.
to sort of honour the mums and babies and dads and families that have
Mm.
gone through it.
Yeah.
Because I think having like an abortion, so to speak, has such a negative connotation with it that
Absolutely.
you try, like, yeah, you're always worried that people are going to judge you, like you're
Yeah.
always worried that people are going to have that, oh well, you made that decision, or
Mm.
and I always remember one of the social workers I dealt with, she's like, you have every right to grieve because you lost a baby too. And I
Absolutely.
remember thinking, like, I do, because I remember saying to her, like, I don't have the right to be upset. I don't feel like I have the right to cry because I put myself in this situation.
Mm.
She's like, no, you didn't.
Mm.
And I've tried to look at it as making the ultimate sacrifice. Like, and I
Mm.
always remember I read like I don't know, like a bit of a journal or something online just as we had the third loss. And it said, as long as my baby's ever known safety and love,
Mm.
they've never known hurt or pain or been scared, and that's what I've sort of tried to tell myself, that
Yeah.
both the boys always knew love, they always knew safety,
Yeah.
and never knew the pain of needles or operations or anything like that. So, you know, um,
Decisions.
yeah. So I had more, after I had him, I had to have another surgery because I had more retained products, another huge bleed, just spontaneously one day it come about. So that was not very pleasant.
Is that a
So again,
common thing that if you have a termination for medical reasons or an early, like first trimester loss, is that a common or it just happens
um,
twice?
I I don't know, to be honest. No one ever sort of brought it up. And when I actually had my third baby, I kept saying to everyone, "Can you please do whatever you can do to make sure that the placenta and everything has been taken out, because this is what happened last time, and I
Mm.
don't want that again." So I think it's just an unfortunate thing, because I suppose it's like a normal, like when you have them at that early age, it's just like a normal birth. You birth the baby
Mm.
and then you birth the placenta. Um, so I think it's just you know
It's just
it's just
hard
part.
luck. Just
Yeah, and I think
okay.
too, like, yeah, I don't know if it's because it was like a healthy pregnancy, that because the placenta might have been attached a lot more
Mm.
come through, but yeah, so we went sort of through that. We went ahead with our second transfer of our embryo, and unfortunately it failed. It didn't stick. So
Yeah.
um, I don't know why, just nothing. We had no, my HCG I think was like 3 or 5.
Yeah.
So there was nothing there. So I was really scared. I thought, oh, are we going to have a second baby? So we did another round of IVF. And again, it was pretty straightforward. We had 3 embryos that came back clear. So
Yeah.
we transferred the first one, which is my youngest daughter, who
Yeah.
is 16 months. So yeah, so I was more prepared for my pregnancy with her. So I had like what I called my team. So I had my counselor, I had obstetrician, everyone on board this time, and I really got on top of the anxiety. So I was actually able to kind of enjoy my pregnancy, which was nice, and just be pregnant. And there were still times when the fears come back and whatever else, but most of the time it was. And it's funny, like the one thing I wanted to experience was a spontaneous labor
Mm-hmm.
because everything so far had been,
Did you get
IVF.
induced with your first?
I
With
was induced with my first, yeah, because my anxiety was just through the roof. So they said, we're just going to induce you.
yeah.
Um, so I was like I said, well, just this time to just have something about this journey, just spontaneous,
Mm-hmm.
and it was. My waters broke at my mum's house one afternoon out of nowhere, and she was born 6 hours later. So on Australia Day,
Oh,
um,
cool. What
she
year?
came 2023.
Oh, cool. Yep, just
So
last.
yeah, last year she was born. Yeah, so sort of it's been a long journey, starting in 2018 to getting here, and it's just, yeah, like you look back and you just think, what the hell
Oh,
was that?
yeah. Yeah.
From thinking falling pregnant in the first month and thinking, sweet, like this is
Mm-hmm.
simple, to, what are we, 5 years later,
And even like when you were sitting in the hospital with your second one, when you were hemorrhaging and you said to your husband, like, I can't do this. And then look what you continued to do, you know?
Yeah, I think I had to just reach that rock bottom. I
Mm.
think it just really stop being strong for a little while and just really just deal with everything. Because I say to people too, grieving babies is a very hard thing. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's not only obviously so emotional, is when you grieve someone that's passed, like a nana or even a parent, you have songs you can listen to, you have places you can
Mm.
go, you have things you can do to remember them. And when you lose a baby, what do you do? Like
Yeah.
that's, you sort of don't know what to do with yourself. So, it's hard.
Yeah.
So,
You either have to make. I was just when I was driving up to Brisbane this morning, I had Milli's playlist on, which is pretty much all I listen to now, and it's just
yeah,
songs that Dylan created when we're in the hospital and was putting in. And every now and again, I hear something and I think, well, that can go in her album. And so I guess we've just made up our own little things to, songs that we love for her. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it's you don't have those same memories. You don't have those same jokes or.
Yeah, and you can't sit with someone and go, "Oh, remember the time we did this?" And
Mm.
and like I said, some people are funny. Like when you talk about, like, oh, like I say, oh, fate, because I named my
Yes,
children.
I was
So
gonna say, can you tell me their names? So number
so
one,
Faith was our first child.
yeah,
Then we had Phoenix.
yeah.
Then we had Montana, which is my daughter. Then we had River,
Oh wait,
and then we have
Montana, cute, and then River.
River, and then we have Willow, which is my youngest.
Oh, they're beautiful names.
So, like I always say, like Faith would have been like school age, and
Mm-hmm.
and I understand some people sort of don't know how to sort of talk about them and that, and but yeah, so
And I think it is
well,
hard for, like, I've interviewed a few people now who have had termination for medical reasons, and you all say of similar things, like, I don't feel like I'm worthy, or I don't feel like I had baby loss, or I don't feel, and I'm like, I haven't been in that situation, but I believe that you belong because no one wants to make that fucking decision. Like
Oh,
that baby is in you, you're carrying it, you've grown it, you've planned it, it's there,
yeah.
so unwell that you have to make, like, it's an awful decision to have to have made.
It is, and you always have this like, what if, he was born healthy, but the problem is
Mm-hmm.
when they're born and it's not the this miracle you think might happen, you then have a very, very sick baby
Mm-hmm.
that, and I can't even take my daughters to get vaccinations because I get so worked up when they get their needles. So I think, how could I have taken a baby to get blood tests,
Mm.
put on incubators and have surgery and all those things. So,
I've,
like
I've been chatting
it
to
all,
a girl over in America who has a little baby with the same disease Millie had,
yeah,
and they don't normally live past about a week. Is
yeah.
I've met a couple. They live to about 5 or 6 days, the same as Millie. And this little boy Jackson over in America, he's 10 months.
Oh,
And
wow.
when I see her posts, I get really sad because obviously, like, I wish Millie was here. But then I was
Mm.
chatting to her the other day and I said it, and she said, honestly, like, she goes, I love my son, but wish he wasn't living through this. Like,
Oh,
they're having so
100%.
many surgeries. They never know what the next day is going to bring. Like, even though they've got a photo on Instagram of him in the pool, you can't see all the tubes that they had to remove for him to go for that little swim, and then the risk of infection, and just they're living a living hell essentially. And so
That's
it's
it.
it's so fucked up. It's so
Well,
fucked.
we knew like one family we sort of spoke to when we originally got the diagnosis of Phoenix's cystic fibrosis. They had older kids that were like 20 and 16 with cystic fibrosis. I was like, oh, look at their ages. And, they were doing apprenticeships and, they were sort of living normalish
Mhm.
lives. And after we lost Phoenix, his son, I believe, went in for a lung transplant and had a stroke on the operating table and passed away. And I said to my husband, losing my baby was horrendous. But could you imagine having him for 16 years and then losing
Mm-mm. No.
how do you. And he was meant to be having this surgery that was meant to prolong his life and help him, and it didn't. So that it kind of you know helped me heal a bit more because I thought things like that, as tragic as it was, it kind of made me go, I've made the right
Mm.
decision. um, and yeah, and it is hard when you see people that have those diseases and they're flourishing, but like you said, it's like everything, you see the good part, but then they're going to show you the down days, or
Mm.
you know the
Yeah, like her child, because I even said to her, like, does he have a life expectancy? And
yeah,
I said to her, I probably feel like I'm the only person that's confident enough to ask that question. But
yeah,
and she said they think he will live quite a long life. But so
wow,
they're not even going to be able to have more kids though, because her whole life now is just to be his carer. And
yeah.
so it's such a shit scenario. Like, it's not something you would wish upon anyone to have to make the decision and or have the decision just handed to you.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing. Like I said, if we hadn't have had this genetic testing
Mm,
pregnancy, we would have found out when he was born, when he had the heel prick test, the blood test. That's when we would have found out. Um, and sometimes I had wished, like, in a way that that was the scenario, so we didn't have to make the decision. But then, like I said, speaking to some of other parents, they're like, we wish we'd been in your position because they were the ones that were blindsided. Like, I know one mum, she had three other kids and this was her fourth. And when they come back and said, she has cystic fibrosis, they were like, we have three other healthy kids. What are you talking about? But they said she was obviously the one in four.
fuck.
Um, so
And
yeah, you sort of,
I'll put a link in the show notes for the genetic testing that you're talking about, because it's
yeah.
Rochelle, who had Mackenzie, baby Mackenzie.
Yeah,
And
so the
shared
Mackenzie
that.
Foundation, yeah. So they
Yeah.
and they yeah, and I tell all any people I know now that are trying for a baby, I say to them, get this testing done. And I get the same answer most of the time. But no one in my family has it. And I say,
Mm.
neither does my husband or I. Like, we're such a
And you
good
guys had 'cause,
example. Well,
yeah, the 3 free ones that you get now. So you can get 3 for free testing, which I think must be CF, SMA, and
Yeah, so it's CF. I can't remember what the third one was because it kind of fell off the radar after everything.
first 2 you're like, yeah, I don't know about the other.
Yeah,
I
so
think
because I think
sorry.
the SMA one that I have is the one that Mackenzie,
Oh,
that she was born with. So, um, yeah, because like I've read her book and that, and it's just again it's harrowing, but it's
mm,
so good to see. I suppose a positive come out of it. Like the Mackenzie mission is
yeah.
really good, trying to help people because IVF is so expensive,
Mhm,
as you probably know. Like
mhm.
it's just, but it was our only
Well,
way. I
this is
think
what
there
I
needs to
said
be
to my
something done about that
husband.
as well. Like.
Yeah, that's what I said to Dylan the other day. So he sent me a link to a news article about a husband and wife over in Perth who just lost their second child
Mm,
to a genetic disease. And I just replied to him, and this is why we're doing IVF, because I can't go through another natural pregnancy and the what ifs and like exactly what you're talking, like your story.
yeah,
I'm not even crying through your story because I'm like sitting here mortified of like, fuck, like
yeah,
absolutely mortified. But at the same time, your story is giving me hope because I think it's amazing that you just kept going, like really, really, really admirable because,
thank you.
and people say it to me all the time, like, you're so brave for not giving up. And so many times I'm like, I want to fucking give up. I want to fucking give up, but I also want babies. And so
Yeah,
my
and
husband
that's
is like,
it's this
yeah,
driving force that's
yeah,
inside of you, I think. And I think like one saying I always live by too is like people say, "Oh, you're so brave." It's like I'm brave because I was given that was the only choice I was given.
yeah.
Like it's yeah, like you said, it's either I give up and just we
Mhm.
not have babies, or
Which
and
I
I
think
actually
would be a
got
really fucking lonely, sad I'm like, I don't wanna be old and have no babies here, like, so I'm willing to put in the hard yards now and just keep fighting for it so that, because I know eventually it has to happen.
yeah, and that's like I said when I started my first IVF round, I made a declaration, I suppose, that I'm doing this for you two, for Faith and Phoenix. Like
Mm,
I will do every needle, I will do every. This is for your honor, like to show that you
yeah,
know. Um, and like I said, I got hope tattooed on my wrist, and it was the wrist I get my blood test out of. So I thought every time I get a blood test, every time
mhm,
I get something, I can just look at that and think, I have hope. Like, I
yeah,
hope this test won't hurt. I hope this
mhm.
test is a good result. I hope they ring with good news. Like,
Yeah,
like I just thought that's all I can do, you
yeah,
know, and just try and,
so hard.
yeah. And I think the other hard thing I found too is like, I've always wanted 3 kids. Um, and starting when we did, we're kind of like, great, you
Pop 'em
plan
out.
it.
There we
Yeah,
go.
you just go, okay, great. We want at this age and this age and this age. Great. So that's the other thing I'm struggling with now. Being the age I am, that urge for still having a third baby is very, very strong.
Mm.
Um,
You have 2 embryos on ice?
so I do. So me and my husband are like, he's very like, I think we're done. And I don't know if it comes from the losses
Yeah,
or but I do think I genuinely do want a third baby.
yeah,
But I think going through such an extensive journey has brought me to my age, and I'm like, there's still such a thing around women's ages and having babies that when I mention it to people, they're like, "Oh, but you're almost 40," and I'm like,
oh, shut the fuck up.
I and I kind of say if this had started how it should have, then I would have my 3 babies by now. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, the last 5 years haven't gone to plan. So
Yeah.
I think that's the other hard thing for a lot of women when they experience loss, and that's we don't have time. You feel like you don't have time to grieve and process it because it's like that biological clock. It's just ticking
Oh,
away in the
absolutely.
background, and
I have a low AMH and
yeah,
I'm 38 and a half. And so when I
yeah,
was pregnant with Millie, I already thought I was old when I was pregnant with Millie. And
yeah,
so when we lost her, I was just like, what the fuck? Like, this can't happen. Like,
yeah,
I'm already such high risk of all the fucking things.
yeah,
You know, I have stage 4 endometriosis. I have low AMH. I'd already had a miscarriage. And then we lost Millie. They've cut my uterus twice to get her out. Like,
yeah,
fuck me. And then, just being pregnant last week through IVF, I was already planning it. The baby was due 2 days before my 39th birthday. I'm like, this is
yeah,
amazing. Then we'll hopefully, have more. And that would be before I'm 30. No, not going to fucking happen now. Like, do you know what I mean? Before I'm
yeah.
30. It's like, but and like the thing that annoys me is people are always like, you can have babies in your 40s. Yeah, you can. Totally. The risk
Mm-hmm.
is higher. Not everyone can in their 40s, not even everyone can in
Yeah.
their 30s. So yes, there are people that fall pregnant in their 40s, not everyone, and yes, it makes it harder. So like,
And I think too, it's still like I still feel like even though like being in the IVF world, you're seeing women in their 40s,
mhm,
some even close to 50, doing transfers and stuff. So you know it is around you, but yeah, you kind of feel, and I also feel like a bit of a like, I've got my two babies. Should I be happy?
mm.
Like, you know, am I selfish for wanting more kids?
You're
It's like,
yearning for. I think at the end of the day, we don't know what's ahead of us. So, whatever you want to keep popping them out, go for it.
yeah, well, that's it. Like, I always thought, oh, when the second come, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm crazy.
Oh,
But yeah, but I think so. I think that's the other thing you go through, like you said, like you're not only dealing with this loss and that, but then it's all like, hang on, my whole life, you sort of my 5 year plan has kind of gone awry, and now I don't know where it's going or what to do. So, um, yeah, but an IVF, it's hard.
yeah,
It's
you
very
got
hard.
crazy numbers of embryos for low eggs. So you got 6 eggs in the first round with 2 good embryos from that.
Yeah, so I got two in the end, and so with my last one, we actually went through IVF Australia again, but we saw Professor Chapman.
Mm-hmm.
So he's actually one of the pioneers of IVF in Australia.
Wow.
He's quite old. My husband's worried he might not have made it to the transfer, but he was very good. He's like, we need as many eggs out of you as possible to test. So he hit me with all the drugs. He's like, because we're doing testing, we need as many as possible. So he amped all my drug levels as high as he would.
Wow.
So I don't know if that was
Yeah,
why I was able to get a few this time. Because I think I got 9 or 8 eggs, and I think then there was 3
in the
that
second round.
were suitable for transfer. So,
That's amazing.
um,
And so you didn't have any abnormal embryos? They were all.
so I think I had 2 that were abnormal. So I think I had 5 embryos that were tested, and from memory, I think 2 of those. And I don't know if that was abnormal for genetic generally or for cystic fibrosis.
Yeah.
They don't really kind of divulge that to me. They just kind of went, "You've got 3, like
Yeah.
leave it at that," kind of thing. I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. You can ask
Um,
the reporting. I'm a real pain to them. I'm always like, can we please get the full report? Like, I even know what gender my embryos were that were
oh
abnormal.
wow,
Yeah.
yeah.
Request that information.
Like, and that's the thing. Like, yeah, I was very like with the IVF. I have like a whole folder, or sort of like say, I was like I want to know the levels and
Mm.
um, all the abbreviations, and like people come to me now and go,
I
so I think
knew,
I'm
okay.
IVF. Can you explain it to me? I'm like, okay, so this is how it's going to go.
You
You
and it.
you delve into it, you just becomes your life. And it's yeah, and I was very lucky. Like my boss had to do IVF, so he was very understanding of the process. And that's the other thing, so many people from that have never experienced this, they get that pushback from people going, "Oh, do you really have to go get a blood test every day?" It's like, yes, like this is time critical. Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
this doesn't happen on this day, and yeah, so like I could never do my injections. So my husband was away for my trigger shot for
Mm-hmm.
my second lot, so I had to get my dad to do it. He was very
Oh,
nervous.
that's
I was
cute.
like, I can't do it. You have to do it. And he's like, and I said, but it has to be at like 7 o'clock on the dot. So we're like, at the like watching the seconds tick down, and so I said, well,
I
you're
asked Siri to set me
creating
an alarm
grandchild.
last month. I said, Siri, set me an alarm for 8 p.m. for my trigger. And
Yeah.
I was driving. And then when I got home, sitting there and at 8, I was like, fuck, that alarm didn't go off. And she'd said,
Oh,
Siri, set it for 8 a.m. instead of 8 p.m.
oh,
Well enough. So I was 20 minutes late, but I didn't really know if it was like such a huge issue. And then the next other 36 hours later, when we went in for the EPU, she's like, "Did you take your trigger at 8 o'clock?" I was like, "Yeah, 8:20." And I said it really like nonchalant. She was like,
yeah,
like, okay, well, I'll have to tell the surgeons we might have to push you back 20 minutes. I was like, "Oh shit, sorry." Like, yeah, I just
yeah,
didn't realize how strict that needed to be.
yeah. Like it's just yeah, it's this whole new world. But yeah, like all the needles, and then I come home and there was still a bit left in the needle. I was like, oh my God, is this, and in the
Mm.
end, I just went, "Ooh," and did it. And I was like, oh, it was the first and last needle I'd given myself.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, oh, I just could, I don't know, the
You just
whole
get
putting
scared, right? What if
needle.
that little bit of medication makes the biggest difference
Oh,
or
that's right. You're so worried. And then I was like, what if that two, if I get bad results, will I be like, oh, is it that mill that I left in there? Or,
yeah,
you know, but yeah, the doctors I've had through IVF have all been really good, really,
that's great.
understanding and stuff. So, yeah, it's been a hard journey, but, I'm very thankful that I have my girls and, but there's still days where I think that's the other thing too. I think when you do have your second baby, there'll be times when you still want your other babies. Like I remember being pregnant with Montana and I just crying. I'm like, I just want my other two babies here. Like
Mm,
I didn't. It wasn't so much like I didn't want this baby. It's like, but I want my other
want
two.
all of
Like I
them.
want
Yeah.
them back as well. Like it's like you want everyone to come back. So
Mm,
you kind of feel like they might replace them. You think, oh God, if I have that baby, then the
yeah.
other one kind of the hurt and that will go away. But
No.
there's still times today where I just get really sad. I'm like, I just want to give them a big cuddle and
I
just
know.
that's the hardest thing.
I went to a new church on the weekend just with a friend to visit, and a heap of people from my old church were there, and half of my mother's group. And I wasn't
Yeah,
expecting that. And one of my good friends was standing in front of me with her 10-month-old. She was born 2 weeks after Millie. She was actually
yeah,
induced the day of Millie's funeral, so she couldn't come. And she's a little brunette baby. And I was just watching her, and I didn't cry or anything but I was just watching, just like, wow, like that's what I'd look like holding Millie, or Millie would be at that age. And like
mm,
I was, we were playing and laughing and having fun and whatever, but it's just like,
yeah.
I don't think there'll ever not be a constant reminder of Millie not being here, what
No,
siblings.
no, 100%. It's always the little things, and like we're looking at moving away from where we live at the moment, so we won't be near the cemetery. And my husband sort of just said in passing the other day, he's like, "Oh, what are we going to do? We're going to be at the cemetery," and I just lost it. And he sort of looked at me, he's like, "What's the matter?" I'm like, "How do I leave them behind? Like, how do I
Mm.
go and them not come with us?" And he's like, "They're not there because they were cremated." And I'm
Oh,
like, "I know, but to just know that I feel like I'm leaving them behind, and
yeah.
that's such a weird. It's yeah, some of the feelings and thoughts you have, like when it rains at the cemetery, sometimes I get upset. 'Cause I'm like, oh, they're in the rain, like they shouldn't be out
Oh,
cold. And he's like, it's just their plaques, you know that, don't you? And I'm like,
is
I
there,
do, but
if they're not buried there, can you take their plaque? Is that something you could go to the?
so that's something I've thought about. Because we're in Sutherland, so at Woronora Cemetery, they have this Garden of Angels,
Mm.
and all it is for babies lost during pregnancy.
Wow.
So it's a little garden with a huge angel statue in the middle,
Yeah.
and then you just get your plaque. And the hospital once a month, babies that have been born that are before the 20 weeks are cremated, and then their ashes are
Mm.
sprinkled over this garden.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, so that's something I have contemplated because I have their plaques there
yeah.
to see the cemetery where we're going. But then it's such a beautiful spot. Um,
Mm.
I'm kind
But
of
I
like, I
mean,
don't want
yeah.
it. So,
Like you could even just afford make like a little
yeah.
garden at home and just have their 3 plaques in a
Well,
garden.
that's it. And that's why I've got their feet tattooed on me because I said to my
Mm.
husband that way, no matter where I go in life, like in this situation, moving, they're there. Like,
Yeah.
they're with us. But I'm also thinking of getting like a bit of a photo shoot done with my two other girls at the cemetery
Yeah.
to kind of have that as all my kids together kind of thing to keep a
Yeah.
photo.
Yeah.
So they're all things like I've got my box upstairs that's got like their footprints and their little outfits that the hospital gave us and everything. So, but yeah, I think it's just all these grief makes your mind think weird things.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
I think, like I said, it's sometimes good speaking to people that kind of go, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
You're not crazy. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, like with the songs before, like all their plaques have got songs on them. So we have three songs that I sort of, the songs I listen to when I'm missing them, or if I hear them, I sort of get a bit,
Mm.
luckily they're not popular songs. So I'm not,
Do they all
breaking
have
it.
their own individual song?
So yeah, so Faith had The Dance by Garth Brooks. Um, so basically it's just a song about, uh, it says, I could have missed the pain, but then I would have had to miss the dance. And
Mm.
I think that's like a line that was really poignant with us. Like,
Right.
yeah, we could have not had her and not had the pain, but then we would
Yeah.
never have had the love and time we had with her. Um, and then Phoenix is one, I don't actually know what the title of the song was, but it's just about, it's like the words of, about a child passing away and saying, just make sure that my mum and dad are always know I'm around. Um, and then Rivers one is a song by Chris Stapleton called oh, it's missing my head now. But it's a same song. It's like, it's about angels, and it's basically saying sometimes, like one line in it is, angels come down to teach us and then they leave us. Um,
Mm.
and again, I think that's poignant with me because I feel like he came, he did what he needed to do, and then he's gone. So,
Yeah.
and I'm actually seeing that artist live next year, so I'm really excited to hopefully see
Oh,
that song sung
you
live.
pull your eyes out.
But yeah, so I've got all those things. So I'll try and do everything. We have Christmas ornaments for them and go to the cemetery at Christmas time and everything. And
Yeah. I think
yeah,
that's
so,
beautiful.
yeah, like it's a hard journey, but I look at all you, like all these mothers like you and all the mothers you interview, and just think, how do we do it? you know,
I literally don't
still,
know.
yeah, we don't, but we do it. So
Yeah. And I think one of like a lot of the things you've said in here have been so amazing. Like you've brought so much awareness to the genetic testing, which I'll post about in the show notes, and then even just about like Panda getting support like through anxiety and postnatal depression. So anxiety during the pregnancy and then postnatal depression after. Bears of Hope counselling was a really good one that you mentioned as well. The fact
yeah,
that they helped you in the hospital with the loss of the babies. Um, yeah, lots. I think you're
I
also.
think, yeah, like I think, like that's the other thing is, like, when parents are going through the pregnancy after a loss, like, make sure you have that support there, because you're going through a lot of hormonal changes anyway. You're emotional anyway, and just try to not rob you of having that joy after experiencing such heartbreak. Try and,
Mm,
because that was what I found hard too, was like, I'm like, I should be so happy, this should be so joyous and celebratory, but here I am just riddled with anxiety, and I
when
hated myself for it, but there was nothing I could do either.
no, well, when we announced our pregnancy last week, I had so many people messaging like, "So amazing to see you, so joyful. You give me so much hope." And so we were so excited. I was saying to people like, "I'm 5% scared, 100% excited." Like I just
Yeah,
had no fear. I thought that was it. And then we lost it. And I was like, oh, like, but, and then like, my sister said to me today, she was like, you just sound a bit numb. Like I've kind of just got no emotion
yeah,
at the moment. And I was like, I said, I hate that I'm more used to hurt and pain and suffering than I am of the excitement. Like, oh, okay, it's gone. Just keep moving on. Just get on with life. Like,
yeah. And that's when I was pregnant with our second one. I remember thinking, one half of my brain was like, oh no, this is how, the movie goes. You have your heartbreak, but then you have your joyous,
mm,
and you deserve it because you've been through pain. And then when it didn't happen that way, I'm like, well, hang on, no, 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 that's not the script. Like, I've had my pain, I've had my hard
mm,
time. I'm now the one that gets rewarded and gets the happy ending. And then when, yeah, you don't get that, you kind of go, well, is this it now? Is everything not going to be? So, you
uh,
know, hopefully for you, it'll be the next one, and
trans.
that'll be a happy ending.
Yeah.
You know, three's a lucky number. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's
we're
just,
just waiting to hear back from our genetic testing for our fifth and sixth embryos because we had two abnormal in the first round, and then
yeah.
the second round we had one abnormal, one good, and then the good one was the one we transferred,
Hmm.
which held and then didn't. So we've got
Yeah.
nothing at the moment. We've got two that have been sent off, so we're just waiting for them. They're still another 2 weeks away. So we're just
That's the
sitting
worst
and
part,
waiting.
it's the waiting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just so
I'm
much
just also
waiting.
like I'm waiting to get my period from this embryo that's failed, so it's like essentially waiting for a miscarriage.
Yeah,
And, I said to Dylan, do we just start another round straight away? And he's like, let's just have a break and wait for the embryos. But then if they come back abnormal, then we just have to start another round anyway. And then it just depends where my
yeah.
period is at. And then if they come back good, well, then we can transfer. But it's just, yeah, it's just everything is time, right? It's just sitting and
That's it.
waiting.
That's the hardest thing. Like, yeah, you think, oh, do I wait? But then that's another, few weeks. And to some people, few weeks is nothing. But
Mm.
when you're in the midst of it, it can be everything. Like,
Well, it's a
so,
matter of, we've got the sign still sitting under our TV, Millie's going to be a sibling baby coming summer 25.
yeah,
Well, if we started this month and transferred, yeah, she still might have a sibling come in summer 25, but if
yeah,
it's grown and it's another month, well, then all of a sudden it's not summer anymore. Like, it's just all of that.
yeah. It's those things. And I think, too, like, I found myself being in like, I kind of liked IVF in a way because it gave me things to do. Like, I think if I was
Mhm.
trying to conceive naturally while grieving, you sort of, I suppose, sitting around doing nothing until that
I
one
agree.
night, and then
You
you're
feel
back around again. While with IVF, you're like, I've got appointments and I've got blood tests and I've got to keep on top of this and I've got to do this. And it kind of kept me busy and motivated and,
I laugh
like,
when you say one night because I'm like, we can have sex 6 or 8 times in that 1 week and it's still not fucking enough to fall pregnant. It's like, come on, how do people
it's just, and, and you see so many people just seem to do it and you just think,
so
we
what?
can
Yeah,
get back
I've
to
never hardly even had sex. I don't even know how it happened. I'm like, oh my fucking god, he's
it's like,
But yeah,
it's like,
I do feel like IVF does make you feel productive, like you're working towards
yeah, and you feel like
something.
you've got people in your corner, like you've got your
Yeah,
nurses and your
yeah.
specialists, and we're all here for the one
A
purpose. You're
small
not sort of
sense
on
of
your own.
you feel like you have a little bit of control as well, a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, like, I remember, like, the first pregnancy, not even knowing what a didn't know what a HCG was. Now I'm like, well, what was your level? Is it this level? This level? Is it this high? Or oh, okay, like you. So
So many of my friends with kids still don't know what those things are. I'm like,
yeah,
no. Dylan's mum, a couple of months ago, Dylan said to his mum, "Oh yeah, well, Shell's ovulating at the moment." How does she know that? What the fuck? Like, or she's testing her ovulation or whatever it was, And I was
yeah,
like, it's funny that people can live their whole life, women can live their whole life, have babies, whatever, and just not know half the shit we have to know if you go through infertility.
yeah. And I think, I know when I first felt pregnant, I just knew what the movies, like, oh, you take the pregnancy test in the bathroom, and
Well,
next thing that's it. And it was like, I didn't know about blood tests to confirm the levels, or
yeah.
if it was this, or like when to get ultrasounds, or yeah, like,
All the shit we
you
should learn in school, to be fair.
yeah, no, that's right. Well, even my mum, she was like, we had one ultrasound at like 20 weeks and that was it.
Yeah.
She goes, so watching me do IVF as well, she's like, wow, like she kept
Mm,
learning so much.
yeah.
And she's had 3 kids. So, like, yeah, like you said. So,
Wild world.
oh,
Thank you
yeah.
very much for sharing. I think you've shared such amazing things today, and I think all of your bubbers will be so proud.
Yeah, so I'm wearing my special jumper. So my husband got this for Mother's Day. So it says that.
Oh, that's cute.
And
Mama established
got
in the
their
18.
names. So that's my 2,
Montana and Willow,
and then that's my other 3.
Faith River and Phoenix. That's so beautiful.
So, and he, God bless him, had the thought to have it on my left arm because that's the side your heart's on. So, and it's good, and it brings conversation up. Like, I saw a lady say, she goes, "Oh, who's Faith River and Phoenix?" So I got to talk about them. So
Yeah,
I like that too. I
no.
like that it makes people ask, and you can talk about them and honor them that way. So it's
Is,
nice.
what was I going to say? You talked earlier, like in the beginning, about you got advice that perhaps having a baby with complications and stuff would be hard on your marriage. How has your marriage been going through everything you guys have been through? Like, it sounds like your husband is beautiful and thoughtful with that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely made us stronger. Like I said, it definitely, like I said at the beginning, I said it made me open up. So now I'm a lot more open with him, and I think we've both seen the rawer side of each other. And I think at the end of the day, even though everyone around us has experienced some sort of loss, we're still the parents. And like it's definitely, I think it's made us stronger, in the sense that, you know, we've experienced this huge loss together.
Yeah.
And like I said, I find myself, I'm a lot more open to him. Like I say, I was just upset today, or, you know,
Mm.
but
And
yeah, but I think
is
it's
he
still
his emotion
tough
and
on the
stuff?
guys. Pardon?
Is he good at showing his emotion and
No,
expressing it? Yeah.
no, not at all. So, he's very much the, men don't cry. We'll
Okay.
be right.
Yeah.
And I remember that's when we found they said the words at the ultrasound with Faith, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat. I remember thinking, I've never seen my husband cry, and I looked over and he was breaking his heart, and that's when I went, holy shit, like,
Yeah.
like I knew it was serious, but I thought
Yeah.
I've never ever seen him cry, and um, so that was
And
really
seeing your
tough. And
partner hurt, I've said it so many times, like seeing their heartache is what makes your heart fucking break.
and I think it's so hard too, because you want to offload so much onto them because they're your person, but at the same time, um, you've got to check into them. And I remember the first counsellor saying to us, you've got to check in on each other. And we made sure for the first few weeks after losing Faith, we just kind of went, are you okay today? And it'd either be just a no and we'd leave it, or yes
Mm,
or no and want to talk about it. But I'd always just say to him, are you okay today?
yeah.
Because I knew he would never say it himself. And I think that's where Bears of Hope are really good too, because they do try and bring men into the conversation a lot, which I
And
think kind of does get a bit blindsided sometimes, especially like
being
even through IVF. Like they
as
just sit in the
a
corner until it's their time
counselor.
for the small room.
Yeah.
Like that was his time to shine kind of thing. But yeah, like even through all that, like I remember one of the nurses saying, like, your wife's about to go through hell with these hormones. So you just suck it up, mate.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you are, but he's also,
I
probably
feel it
worried.
too. Like Dylan said to the other day, he goes, I just feel really empty. Like when we found out that
Yeah,
pregnancy hadn't held, he's like, I just feel empty. And he even came home from work, which he does not ever, he normally
yeah,
work through, go to the gym, whatever's like lots of energy. And he was like, he said he was coming home for me, but I could tell he was just also really sad. And then this morning he gave me a cuddle and I was like, I just feel sad. And he was like, me too. So
yeah.
I think that's so important because they feel it. Dylan's yearning for babies, which
Oh, and I
gets
think
me
like
going.
guys don't. It's obviously not a conversation they're going to have. Us women, we might bring it up and talk about it, but I think, yes, I think like that's why I like Bears of Hope, because they do a lot. They have a lot of catch ups for men and stuff, and like
Um,
they do the Beards of Hope, which is a fundraiser. So like for the men to grow the beards and
oh,
then
really? I've not.
raise money and shave it off, which my husband did one year, and he had like a beard down to like his chest, and then went clean shaved at the end of the month, and it was
Needs
shocking. But
of hope.
I think that he felt like he could do something. I think that for
Yeah,
that month felt like
that's so
he
cool.
was contributing, but yeah, it's definitely very hard for them because it's all about us. But
Yeah,
we're going through it too, and they want to be dads too. So
absolutely. And I know
yeah,
Chris Wood, I've interviewed him before. He just reached out to Dylan yesterday.
Attention, please. Attention, please. There'll be a short test for fire evacuation system. Please disregard all tone. Attention, attention. There'll be a short test for fire evacuation system. Please disregard all tones. This is a test and test only. Thank you.
Wow. Clearly using a podcasting studio. I wasn't aware that was going to be up.
there we go. um, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Chris Wood is now working for Red Nose as well, Australian. He does a lot of work with fathers and dads, and he's doing like a golf day. And he's
yeah,
and he reached out to Dylan, which I love. And Dylan's like, "Who's this guy?" And I told him, and I was like, "He's just doing a lot in that space," which I think is really cool.
yeah, and I think it's important because like going through talking about like what our life would be like if we were to go through with our pregnancy. He was very honest with me and said, I don't think I can do it. He goes, how do I work 60-hour weeks to pay for medication and not be able to come to the hospital to see my baby sick, or
Yeah.
Watch you fall apart and
Mm.
not be able to be there because I'm so exhausted from working to try and
Um,
make sure I've got the medication and the money for nurses and stuff. And
yeah. And I think also living.
I appreciated him being honest in that point and not just saying, "Oh, it'll be all right," going, "I don't think I can do this," because
Mm,
that really was one of the keynotes for me as well to go, okay, this isn't what our life needs to be,
yeah.
so.
I think people hold a lot of guilt about making those decisions, but I think, like you've said, if you speak to any parent that is going through it, the decisions would have been different, and maybe not for everyone. But I think also, like, we lived 6 days in that hospital every day, not knowing if it was Millie's last.
Mm.
I can only imagine that longer. Like, yeah, I would love to have more days with her, but every
Oh,
day you
yeah,
have them alive, you don't know if it's your last, and that's fucking petrifying. Like, and then you live with hope. Like, there was one day, the day before she had her final day, it was like our best morning. It was the Wednesday, and we're like, she's amazing.
yeah,
She's doing so
yeah,
well. And then by 4 o'clock, she'd gone downhill. And then that
yeah,
we almost lost her. And then they brought her back at 10 p.m. that night. And then we had our last day with her the next day. And so it was just this, every single day was this roller coaster of, they're going to live, they're okay. No, they're not.
yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
And
Like,
that's the thing, like, you'd go through life with, like, kind of getting into this false sense of security going, "Oh, we're great. This is
mhm,
good." And then bam, it will hit you. And yeah. And I think for anyone that's making the decision, if you can somehow reach out to the parents, I think, and
mm,
obviously it's finding the right parents too. I was
yeah,
very lucky. The parents I spoke to were very honest and, because speaking to the specialist, they're like, "Oh, there's so many advances in medicine, and
mm,
there's this happening and this happening." And when we looked into the medicines, it was like $1,000 a week or something to have this medicine, and we're
mm,
like, we can't afford that.
yeah,
So I think then having the parents actually sit with us and go, "This is the day to day life of what we have to deal with," and telling us what their child was experiencing that day, and that you think, wow, like this is
mm,
a life opener into what we could be doing too. So
yeah,
I think that was the most helpful thing. I think the specialists are great, but I think definitely speaking to parents
yeah,
that live and breathe it and have that fear and the feeling behind it,
yeah.
made a huge difference. So, but yeah, yeah, it's not great, but
It's wild. Well, I am excited to hear about when you do your next transfer.
yeah.
I'm sure you will. I feel like it's on
I
the
think so many people feel like you're nuts, but
card.
yeah, I
You
don't
know
know.
what feels right. I think it's like with all of our journeys, you know when it would be time to give up, and you know when it's time to keep going. Like for us, it's like
100%.
you think you can't go through another one, and then you get the news, and you're like, "Hey, well, what's next?" We go again. We go again.
Yeah, no, that's right. And all the, prayers for you and your husband that
Thank you.
your miracle's just around the corner because it can be,
Mhm.
even though it might not seem it.
Yeah. Thank
So,
you. Thank you. Thank
okay.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and glad we got the technical issue sorted out.
At the beginning, I was like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna lose my mind." We got.
So I say technology is great when it works and shit when it doesn't. But we got it.
Oh my gosh, it literally just cut out as well. I was like, "Pardon?" Go up on us. Thank
That's
you
good.
so much, beautiful.
All right.
An
Thank you
absolute
so
pleasure.
much.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. Bye. Bye.